Okay, guys, we're starting chapter 28 now. So, we're going to be talking about the Affluent Society, or really, we're going to be looking at how America's economic growth affected the whole population in America post World War II. So, we're looking at right after World War II up into the 1960s. Really, we're focusing on the 50s, but just so you have a general time frame, we're going to be looking at right after World War II up into the 1960s. And the first thing we want to talk about is what were the sources of economic growth in the country. There have been many theories about what caused the economic boom post-World War II. I mean, we all know what caused the boom during World War II. It was government spending during the war. But now we're looking at what is causing the economic growth after World War II. There are several sources, so if you want to put like a heading of sources of economic growth, that would be fine. Number one is still government spending. But just to give you an idea of how much the economy has grown, 1945 to 1960, the GDP, or GNP in this case, the gross national product, which is similar, it grew by 250%. So this is very impressive growth. In a 15-year period, our economic growth more than doubles. And one source, again, is government spending. So we see things like government spending during the Korean War, defense spending during the Cold War, and also major spending on the federal interstate highway program, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But right now, you just need to know that government spending was a major source of economic growth. Also, we have suburban growth. So there's a movement here to build homes in suburban areas. So we have more construction, we have people that are buying more gas because they're driving from suburban areas into the urban industrial areas. We have also businesses moving. So just the general suburban growth is also causing economic growth. The baby boom, there are more babies, so there are more hospital bills, there's more formula, more diapers. The population rose significantly, about 20% in the decade after World War II. So the baby boom drives the economy. These are several reasons why the economy grew. Government spending, baby boom, and suburban growth. And we'll talk about a few others as well, and specifically where the economy grew versus where it didn't. Alright, so a couple of things that we need to talk about now is how the West became an industrial and really economic center versus it used to be the East. If you look at American history, even before the Revolution, when there were just colonies, everything was on the East. People started moving westward, but the industry stayed in the East. Well, now we're seeing, as a result partially of World War II with the shipping industry and the shipbuilding industry, we see the economy expanding in the West. So New Mexico, California, Nevada, these places start becoming centers of economic growth. Also Arizona. And one of the reasons is the climate, obviously. People don't if you want to work on the East Coast, that's great, but when you get 2 feet of snow during the winter versus no feet of snow in LA, a lot of people would just opt for the climate in the West. So that's one reason, but another reason is really new infrastructure that allows people to get out there more easily and for products to be shipped cross-country a lot more easily. Another thing that we need to talk about is the new economics. The Great Depression caused people to start to doubt the viability of capitalism as an economic system. People blamed all of the problems on capitalism and not on people who didn't realize what the economy was doing or people who got in over their heads. So instead of blaming the speculators, instead of blaming people who bought stocks on credit, things like that, people blamed the system, which is easy to do. Instead of taking personal responsibility, a lot of times people want to blame the system. So people started blaming capitalism and saw it as an unworkable system that was just doomed to fail. However, with Keynesian economics, that's K-E-Y-N-S, I'm sorry, Keynesian, Keynesian economics, capitalism was seen as viable again. And Keynesian economics was basically that the government would regulate some to stabilize the economy without directly being involved in economic oversight. So Keynesian economics is the new hero of capitalism for a while. And we're going to see a change in that later because it's going to move from Keynesian economics to, with Reagan, supply-side economics. But we don't need to know that just yet. I'm just letting you know there's going to be a change. But for now, Keynesian economics reigns supreme. It's the new economic system, and it revitalizes capitalism. Now, it's not strict capitalism because there is some governmental oversight, but it's nowhere near socialism where the government oversees everything and controls a lot of aspects in the economy. Okay, the next topic we're going to be covering is capital as in money and labor. So we talked about unionization, cooperation with the unions, between the government and the unions during World War II. Now we're going to see some cooperation going on between the unions and the corporations more so than the unions and the government. First thing we need to know is that there were a lot of mergers, corporate mergers, where smaller companies would merge together into one bigger company. And we're seeing this not just in industry now, but we're also going to see this in agriculture, where we start getting big ag, where the small farmers having trouble competing because the bigger companies have more capital behind them, they've got more investors, and they can weather out more economic hardship than can the small farmer. However, with the economy booming as it is, the corporations really don't want to miss out on any economic opportunities. They don't want to miss out on any opportunities to make money. So they are trying their best to avoid strikes. They try to strike a deal with the labor unions so that if they give on their end what seems like a fair wage and fair benefits, the union is going to say, we won't worry about other more minor issues. So the businesses are making some important concessions to the unions, and in return, the unions are following what's referred to as the post-war contract. So this means that the workers get good benefits, good wages, and in return, the union basically says, other issues, we'll just put them off on the sideline, we'll worry about them later. And as a result, strikes just plummet in percentage. Strikes are very infrequent compared to what they were before the post-war contract. Alright, now the next major topic we're going to cover is that of the increase in science and technology, or the increase in growth in these areas. The first thing is medical breakthroughs. And I know I'm supposed to know everything that's gone on in American history, and I try to live up to that. However, there are some things I don't know. And this is one thing that throughout the course of the year in doing research for this class that I learned that I never knew before. And that was developments made with penicillin. Now, I knew that penicillin was developed in the 1900s. However, I didn't realize that it wasn't commonly available until the late 1940s, around 1948. So antibiotics had been researched for a while. In the early 20s, there were discoveries made that antibiotics, there were certain things that could be used to kill bacteria. And then further advancements were made on things that could be used to kill bacteria that also didn't harm humans. Because, I mean, obviously, it's no good to kill a bacteria if it kills the person taking the antibacterial drug, right? So, anyway, with the advent of penicillin, people were able to live through a lot of infections that they previously weren't, or a lot of infections that could have turned more serious, were able to be treated with penicillin or with antibiotics that otherwise could have turned into more dangerous things. So this leads to more people living through infections, hence population stays more stable, population growth occurs more readily, and also this leads to other medical research into other antibiotics that are used to treat other bacteria, because I don't know if you know this or not, but penicillin isn't just this panacea that treats all bacteria equally. Some bacteria are treated or respond, some infections respond better to other antibiotic treatments. Hence why we have lots and lots of different antibiotics. Anyway, other advances are being made, like vaccination. In the 1930s, scientists discovered how to grow viruses in laboratories in other tissues. So basically, like right now, they use eggs a lot. They'll grow vaccine, like forms of viruses in eggs. But it was something that was developed in the 1930s. And probably the most influential vaccine during the time period in question here is the Salk vaccine for polio. Polio, which was also known as infantile paralysis, was something that affected a lot of people. Many children got polio, and then they had a hard time functioning because it would attack the nervous system. And so a lot of times they wouldn't be able to walk. Or if they did walk, they had to have assistance, whether with crutches or leg braces. So the polio vaccine essentially eliminates polio by the late 60s. Your book says the early 60s. There were some cases of polio after that, and I guess there still are very rarely, but the cases of polio later were actually sometimes vaccine related, where people would accidentally take a double dose of the vaccine, which would trigger a polio reaction. I personally know someone that happened to, but that was a rare occurrence. So anyway, the Salk vaccine stops the polio epidemic that's going on in America, and it also helps lower infant mortality rates. All right, really quickly on to a topic that I'm sure is of little interest to a lot of you, but it's somewhat significant, and that is the topic of pesticides. Now, today, pesticides, when they're talked about, usually it's the issue of pesticide residues on foods, or pesticides that are genetically modified to actually exist inside of certain plants, or the ills of using pesticides because of the petroleum used in them. It's always about the environmental impact or about the impact on people consuming them. So things like glyphosate, that's Roundup, or other things are hot topics now, particularly by people that support the organic food movement. But back during the late 30s and early to mid 40s, pesticides were seen as a very beneficial thing because they helped to, one, protect crops from destruction. So a lot of pests, hence pesticides, that were destroying crops were able to be killed by these chemical compounds. So there's more food that's produced per acre because less food is being destroyed. Now, also, DDT. This is one of the most controversial pesticides ever because it was used to kill mosquitoes, among other things. It was just this catch-all pesticide. It was used very liberally. Like, people use DDT on anything. But a scientist by the name of Rachel Carson, who has several nature preserves named after her now, several in Maine actually, she did studies that showed that DDT was harmful to long-term to animals. She did research on birds and showed that, among other things, DDT caused bird shells to be more fragile, like the eggshells, not bird shells, eggshells to be more fragile. And as a result, when the mom sat on the eggs, they got crushed, and so it's going to kill all the birds. Well, more modern studies have shown that her methods may have been questionable. However, they resulted in getting DDT banned later. But right now, DDT is all the rage, and it kills lots of pests, particularly mosquitoes, which cause malaria,